So welcome everybody to the Development Control and Regulatory Board for Thursday 23rd of May 2019. Can I just remind everybody that this meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website and will also be available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. So if you could please turn your microphones on when you're speaking and off when you're finished. So this is the first meeting of the council year, and we have a couple of changes to the membership of the board. So we have Mrs. Richards, so welcome to Mrs. Richards, and Mr. Charlesworth has come back, an old previous member of the board, so welcome. We also have one substitute today. Mr. Kaufman is substituting for Mr. Gamble. So as this is the first meeting of the council year, the first item on the agenda is appointment of chairman. Mr. Coxon was nominated at the annual council meeting to be chairman of the Development Control and Regulatory Board. Can I have somebody to propose that? And a seconder, please.
Yeah.
All in favour? Thank you very much. So Mr. Coxon is appointed as chair of Development Control and Regulatory Board for 2019-20. Welcome, Mr. Coxon. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for your confidence in me. Item 2 then is election of deputy chairman. I'd like to propose from the chair Tony Gillard.
I'll second.
Yeah. All in favour? Thank you. Item number 3 is minutes of held of the meeting on the 11th of April 2019 on pages 3 to 6. Are there any comments on that? No comments? Yep. Been moved and seconded. All in favour? Thank you. Item number 4 is question time. No questions have been received. Item 5 is questions asked by members under standing orders. None of those have been received either. Item 6 is to advise of any other items which the chairman has decided to take. That we haven't any of those. Item 7 is declarations of interest. It is noted that all members who are also members of a parish, town, district or liaison committee will have personal interest in those applications which relate to areas covered by those authorities. Are there any further declarations at this time? That's no. Thank you. So that moves us on to petitions. Have any petitions been received, Ewan?
We have not received any petitions within the 8-day time slot required for committee meetings, so there is no petitions for this meeting.
Yeah. Thank you, Ewan. Next item is item number 9 then, which is the distributor road at Melton Mowbray. I'd like to say that committee members did go out on Tuesday to look at the proposed road that is proposed to be built. We visited all the key points as to where the islands are going to go and the river is to be diverted and the railway. Before I ask Nick to present the report, I'd like to just bring Mr. Cross in just to give us a bit of a rundown on how we're playing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Welcome to the new members. Welcome to this new minister here and this new committee. Just want to say a couple of things, please, as your legal advisor, to remind you that the law does allow the County Council to take decisions on its own planning applications, and you've got 2 before you this afternoon, one in respect to the district road at Melton Mowbray and one in respect to a school. Just want to remind you from your training that you treat these applications in no way to be different from any other ordinary application, so you don't give any favour or consideration for the fact that it's a County Council planning application. I remind you that as a committee you're an independent planning regulatory committee, so you apply your own judgment and minds to the decisions that you take. I hope that helps, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Now could I ask Nick to present the...
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Item 9 is a planning application, as mentioned by colleagues, for a north and east Melton Distributor Road, including a 3-metre wide shared footway cycleway. Just to set the context first of all, the image on the screen is taken from the Melton Borough Council local plan, which has recently been adopted, and this although the image is not especially clear, what this seeks to show is a plan of Melton Town Centre taken from the adopted local plan, with an indicative area of investigation for where a Melton Distributor Road will be located, and that's the coloured area around the north, east and south of the town. Also on that plan is areas of residential development which are highlighted. It should be yellow, but it's in green colour at the north of the plan and at the bottom. The Melton Borough Plan set out a vision to provide 6,000 homes as well as employment and strategic infrastructure. The plan talks about significant problems of congestion within the market town of Melton Mowbray, with problems getting from one side of the town to another. That plan's strategy for growth is based around substantial housing growth in the form of those 2 sustainable neighbourhoods, one to the north and one to the south of the town, which would provide at least 3,700 homes, which represents at least 65% of the plan's total housing allocation. This sits alongside an ambitious plan for the new road infrastructure that would both relieve pressure on the town's congestion and would facilitate the easy movement of vehicles, providing significantly improved access to jobs and other strategic road corridors linking the town to neighbouring towns and cities. This is a key piece of infrastructure in the Melton local plan, and which of course this is subject to the planning application that we're considering today. The application site is approximately 200 hectares, and the red line on the screen illustrates the application site boundary. It extends from the north, which is sort of northwest Nottingham Road, around the east and towards the southeast, linking eventually to Burton Road. It would pass around the outskirts of Melton Mowbray to the north of the Melton Country Park and the east of Thorpe Arnold, and also to the north of Burton Lazars, cutting across a number of arterial routes. The River Eye, which is a site of special scientific interest, cuts across a railway line, and the former Melton Mowbray Navigation and Oakham Canal. Most of the land is in agricultural use, with the remainder being either existing highways or non-motorised uses, with some abandoned buildings and watercourses also as part of the scheme. Now, the application site boundary, as you'll see from the plan, extends much wider than the route of the road itself, and this is to cater for ancillary works that are necessary to enable the road to be constructed. And that includes things like landscaping, land reprofiling, drainage works, site preparation and construction activities. So the plan that you see in front of you shows in green the route of the proposed road. It will be a 7.1 kilometre road, single carriageway, 7.3 metres wide. There will be 6 new roundabouts, which hopefully you can see on the plan on the screen. They're numbered 1 to 6, starting at the top left-hand corner. And as I say, those roundabouts are where they cross existing roads. A speed limit of 40 miles an hour between roundabouts 1 and 3 is proposed, and 60 miles an hour between roundabouts 3 and 6. As I say, a 3-metre wide shared cycleway footway is proposed adjacent to the northbound lane, separated from the carriageway by a verge. The report sets out the detail of the proposal, including bridge crossings, culverts, safety barriers. Lighting will be provided to the roundabouts, but not in between the roundabouts. The scheme includes diversion of the River Eye south of Saxby Road, which presents the opportunity for environmental enhancement. Significant landscaping is proposed along the new road to replace lost trees and to provide screening, visual interest and to enhance biodiversity. You'll also see from the report that noise attenuation features are proposed, and that's in paragraph 19 of the report. Amendments to the right-of-way are set out, and also including rerouting of those pedestrian routes and extinguishing of existing routes. If approved, the construction works, I understand, would commence next year, late next year, taking approximately 2 years to complete. I'll just run through some of the images. So we have detailed images here of the different roundabout junctions. So the roundabout number 1 is where it cuts across Nottingham Road. Roundabout 1 would also serve the first phase of the sustainable neighbourhood to the north, to which Melton Borough Council are currently considering planning applications by the County Council and by Richborough Estates for housing development. Roundabout 2 cuts across Sculford Road, and again that would serve an additional part of the housing development as part of the sustainable neighbourhood. Roundabout 3, that would provide a dedicated access to Twin Lakes Theme Park, which we saw those members who were on site on Tuesday will have seen, and also it cuts across the Melton Spinney Road. Roundabout 4 cuts across the A607 Melton Road. And then we have roundabout 5. This cuts across Saxbury Road, and this is where the River Eye would be diverted back to its natural state. The existing river will be retained as existing, and that is certainly positive from a biodiversity point of view. Roundabout 6 is where is the final part of the north and east distributor road, where it cuts across Burton Road, the A606. And this would also provide access eventually for housing development at the south, part of the southern sustainable neighbourhood. We do have some cross-section drawings where I apologise that they're not particularly clear to see, but this is to sort of demonstrate how the new bridge crossings would work in relation to the river, and also we have drawings in a moment in relation to the railway crossing. So in terms of landscaping, extensive landscaping is proposed, as I've mentioned a few moments ago, for screening purposes to enhance the visual impact of the development, and also to, in the interest of biodiversity, creating a wildlife corridor along the route. So this proposes significant tree planting as well as hedgerows, shrubs, and various types of planting. There would also be water features as part of the drainage proposals around the scheme. Just in terms of the analysis, I obviously won't repeat the report. It's an extensive report, comprehensive report. The application has been subject to environmental assessment, and you'll see that from our analysis we're content that the mitigation measures proposed are acceptable and address the impacts of the development on the local environment. You'll also see that we've concluded that the development fully accords with the new Melton Local Plan, and in particular policies IM1, SS4 and SS5, which are directly relevant to this proposal. The report sets out the consultation that we've carried out. Over 1,000 people have been consulted. We've received 75 letters of representations, and in a moment I'll refer you to the supplementary report where there's a few additional responses. But 46 objections were received, and most of these concerns have either been addressed through mitigation, through conditions, or through changes to the scheme. I'll leave it there for now, but as I say, happy to answer questions as we go through. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nick. We have 3 speakers this afternoon on this item. Sam Mellon, Ian Veers and Mr. J.B. Rhodes. Could I ask Mr. Sam Mellon please to come forward and sit over there? If you'd like to press the button in the middle, Mr. Mellon, when you're ready to speak. You've got 4 minutes to address the committee, and then if you just remain in your seat when you've finished speaking, just in case any members of the committee wants to ask you a question, but the question will only be on what you've said today. So start when you're ready, please.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sam Mellon, and I am the owner of a property recognised as being affected by the MMDR proposal with respect to Sawgate Road and Lag Lane in Burton Lazars. I believe, at this stage, actually, I was going to say I believe you have visited my location in the last few days, and I hope your visit will help me explain the logistics of my argument. But having just spoken to Mr. Walters and seen the supplementary report, it's unfortunate that you haven't visited the part of the plan that affects my building. Disappointing. I wish to object to this planning application on the grounds of health and safety oversights within this plan, and if I may explain my reasoning. Sawgate Road and Lag Lane will be closed to vehicle access at both ends of these roads as part of the MMDR process. It has been recognised that this proposal is unsafe in its current form, and section 3.3.5.1 of the MMDR Stage 1 Road Safety Audit states, and I quote, "It increases the likelihood of collisions involving vehicles." The reason being that large agricultural vehicles will have to park on the road whilst the gates in Lag Lane and Sawgate Road are opened. The vast majority of vehicle access actually takes place at the Sawgate Road / Lag Lane junction in Burton Lazars. This is because the main agricultural store which serves the local 300 acres is located here and is in constant use throughout the seasons. These agricultural vehicles require unrestricted wide access for turning, loading and offloading. It is clear that if these gates are fitted without extra initiatives, this will cause a major traffic problem. This is because the following facts have been overlooked. Currently, Sawgate Road and Lag Lane are favourite spots for ramblers, dog walkers, etc. And these people always park their vehicles off-road on Sawgate Road and Lag Lane. In busy periods like weekends, etc., the volume of vehicles parked means other vehicles spill onto Cross Lane and further along Sawgate Road, restricting the road width. The intersection between Sawgate Road, Lag Lane and Cross Lane is a 90-degree blind bend, and vehicles parked on these roads force other vehicles to negotiate this bend on the wrong side of the road. Sawgate Road is a single-track road, meaning there is no space to avoid an oncoming vehicle on the wrong side of the road. I have witnessed this problem at first hand and indeed have been forced off the road myself because of it. As my property was recognised as being affected by the MMDR process, I received a visit from Mr. Andy Jackson, who's in the room today, who is the Senior Engineer for Major Programmes at Leicester County Council. And we discussed my concerns about the proposal, and coincidentally, whilst we were viewing the actual roads concerned, Mr. Jackson actually witnessed a vehicle going around this blind bend on the wrong side of the road. So I would summarise as follows. Closing Sawgate Road and Lag Lane junction with gates will give those who currently park in these roads no alternative but to park on Cross Lane and further up Sawgate Road, on a single track road adjacent to a 90-degree blind bend. This will force traffic to drive on the wrong side of the road as witnessed by your senior engineer whilst negotiating a blind bend. It should also be noted that these roads do not have any street lighting, so the danger is increased in gloomy or dark conditions. Vehicles have had to violently swerve to avoid a head-on collision and consequently have ended up mounting the verge and crashing into my front garden.
Mr. Mellon, your time's really
Well, I have 10
conclude?
seconds probably left.
Yeah.
Okay. In fact, I showed your engineer the actual damage caused, which happened 2 weeks before his visit. So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe I've highlighted a problem, but I'd like to also proffer a solution. I do not object to the gates being installed. I'm not a NIMBY. However, I strongly feel that their installation must be in conjunction with other measures. I would therefore propose that double yellow lines are painted for 50 to 100 yards either side of these gates to prevent dangerous parking in the vicinity of the blind bend and allow unrestricted agricultural vehicle and local resident access to the land which is going to be gated. Thank you for listening today.
Thank you, Mr. Mellon. Any questions? No, looks like you're free to go.
Smash it. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I please ask Ian Veers to take the seat wherever he is? Oh, it's there, look. 4 minutes, Ian, the same as Mr. Mellon.
Thank you, Chair, members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name's Ian Veers, for those who don't know me. I'm the Assistant Director for Highways and Transport here at Leicestershire County Council. I'm also the Senior Responsible Officer looking after the Melton Distributor Road. Nick's already talked through you and the major application that we have forward to today. I just wanted to set it in a little more context, if that's okay. The delivery of this road actually forms part of the wider Melton Transport Strategy, which was approved we should be investigating from 2015 from Cabinet to deal with the real traffic issues that have been occurring in Melton Mowbray for many, many years. The strategy itself is not just about delivering a road, it's about walking, cycling, sustainable transport, and how, once the traffic is moved out of Melton, the roads can be reconfigured to effectively use those to reinvigorate the town centre. As you've already heard, the road also does help deliver 4,500 new dwellings, over 6,000 new jobs. The congestion for those people who live in Melton Mowbray and try and travel through or around each day is considerable, and is also a diversion route for the A1 when it's shut. So the delivery of this road will offer much relief. Notwithstanding that, we are very conscious that the delivery of a road can be seen as a bad thing, so a great deal of work has been done to mitigate the impact of the road, and through the extensive consultation we've been undertaking for many years over the preferred line and then the actual detailed design, mitigations for planting, the actual movement of the alignment of the road have enabled us, with great involvement from the local population, to actually come up with a solution that we feel many, many people in Melton now support. Funding for the scheme, we've had to go through many vigorous Department for Transport bidding processes, which has involved us not only looking at which was the right side of Melton to travel around with the road, north, south, east, west, but also which was the most cost effective to build and which delivered the most for using national funds. I think all I can say is I've never been involved in a scheme that we were delivering that's had so much public support, and the biggest comment I would say most we got back through the consultation process was not only are you actually going to deliver it, but when are you going to? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Any questions for Dan?
Thank you, Chairman. You've just heard the previous speaker talk of the concerns, and his solution was yellow lines. Would that be in keeping with your thought process? Would that be something that would be acceptable?
Chair, are you happy I answer that? Okay.
Yes,
I'm aware of the objector's concerns. This matter has been looked at before, as it is something that we've been in discussion with him previously about. Through the road safety audit, and there are several more road safety audits to be taken through. It wasn't identified as a particular issue so far, but being aware of that concern, what we will be doing is obviously monitoring that as we bring the scheme in and what impact it could have on a very, as you heard, single track rural isolated road where people currently park already. Whether that will make a difference where there's no actual recorded injury accidents so far means would we have to bring in double yellow lines, which members may remember you can park on for loading and unloading anyway, would make a difference, and would they actually be enforced? I think the right thing to do is, it might be a case of, will we put signing up near the entrances or around the bend for polite notices, because I usually find people who are dog walkers and people out enjoying the countryside are more respectful of where they do things. But we are aware of those concerns and we will follow those through the development of the scheme.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Any further questions? Sean?
Yes, could you give us a bit more detail on the length of the road which crosses the railway line? How do you propose to put the bridge in and minimise disruption to rail services?
As you can imagine, Network Rail have had considerable talks with us about how we will be doing that. We will take track possessions at appropriate times for bringing the bridge in. A lot of the construction will happen offline and then the tracks will be brought in. This has been an area where we've had to do an awful lot of thinking about the engineering works, as we're actually crossing the river, the railway line, and ducking under the associated power lines in the area, as well as diverting the river. So a great deal of engineering discussion has gone into that, and we've actually lengthened some of the spans in the way we're delivering the works, so we can actually approach at a better angle. We will be looking, as you can imagine, not only with rail disruption but road disruption to minimise that as much as possible while we're constructing the routes.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. Thank you, Ian. Could I ask Byron Rhodes, please, to come on? Five minutes, Byron.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. I'm Byron Rhodes. I'm Deputy Leader of the County Council, and I should say that I, in that capacity, property is part of my portfolio, and therefore some of the developments which will follow from the construction of this road, particularly around Sizenby Farm, which I think has been alluded to in near Junction 1, will be something which I'll be pushing forward and wanting to see. The advantage of this road and the need for it is actually being put forward to facilitate the development of the Melton houses in the Melton local plan, which was adopted last October. And over 4,000 houses will be facilitated by its construction. But the initiation of the construction of the road came about initially from Melton itself, because of pressure from local inhabitants for many, many years, in fact as long ago as 40 years, largely because of the very heavy congestion for traffic in the centre of the town, and particularly in certain localities, and there's very, very poor air quality and a great deal of disruption to life, and people are concerned about the effects on health and so on. This is seen to be a way of freeing the town up from that traffic, with this other developments which will take place as part of the Melton traffic strategy, and bringing about a much better quality of life for Melton, but at the same time also providing for the growth that the town needs and the county needs in the construction of over 4,000 houses. My other specific responsibility lies as the division member for part of the territory through which the road actually travels, which is essentially in the vicinity of Thorpe Arnold. And my other colleagues who represent the other divisions in Melton are responsible for the areas and for the rest of the road. That's Mr. Orson, Mr. Pearson, and Mrs. Posnett, but they're not here today. I have been approached, it is fair to say, by two local residents who live in the vicinity of Thorpe Arnold. A local farmer who had a concern about moving cattle between one part of his farm to the other. That was successfully resolved. And another gentleman who has horses and horse stables, and he has some ongoing difficulties, it's fair to say, because some of his property and business will lie on one side of the road and other parts of it on the other side. But I think quite a lot's been done to alleviate those difficulties. So I am quite confident, and also following discussions with Thorpe Arnold, Waltham and Thorpe Arnold Parish Council, that everything has been done that can be done to alleviate any disadvantage to local residents that live in my patch. The only one thing I did notice in the report, it says the road commencement should be no later than the 23rd of May 2022. I would rather hope, and I have been advocating, as Mr. Veers will testify, for that actually to be the completion date of the road, which is 3 years from today, and I hope that is they still have that in mind. I'm happy to answer any questions, Chairman.
Any questions for Byron? No, looks like you're free to go, Byron. Any comments from Mr. Orson, Mr. Pearson or Mrs. Posnett, Ewan?
We've received comments from Mr. Joe Orson, who, to sum up, was in support of the application and the proposed conditions.
Thank you. It's open to members now then. Tony?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be supporting this. I was on the site visit. I think it's really good news for Melton, and I'm happy to move the recommendations, Chairman.
Yeah, is there a seconder for that, David? Did you want to speak, David?
Well, just to endorse what's just been said. There is a need for a bypass in Melton. Nothing is ever perfect, but I think this has been well designed. We've been in and had a look at it. There's been a lot of thought and preparation. I'm particularly pleased to see there's a landscaping scheme that'll try and hide it a little bit. But I think it's a good scheme, Chair, and I'm happy to second the motion.
Dan, did you want to speak? Or?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to welcome the scheme, actually, one of the things I did pick up on is the ongoing pollution of vehicles in a small town is obviously quite important, and I think it's a very responsible response to that condition to alleviate the problems, but also to create, hopefully, a lot healthier air atmosphere in the town, which I think is a responsible action to do. So, yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm very much in favour.
Mrs. Wright?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to support. I just had a question regarding noise mitigation. I noticed with reference to page 1319, it talks about the noise and the noise barriers that were proposed to be installed in 2 places. My question is really just regarding roundabout 6. Is there any plans to do anything there, or was that decided it wasn't necessary? Because I believe there's houses within a certain distance there. Thank you.
My understanding, Chairman, is that that's not part of the proposal. Obviously, the environmental impacts has been assessed as part of the planning application, and that's set out within page 26 of the report. Clearly, if noise was going to become a problem as part of the application, that's something that could be looked at, but my understanding is it's not part of the proposal because it's not found to be necessary.
Okay. Michael Charlton?
Just to follow that through, so if it did become necessary, could it be looked into?
We can check with that. Yes. Michael, while he's looking.
Sorry, Jim, just to clarify that. Yeah, so it's as I've said, it didn't require any additional mitigation, but additional planting is being proposed in that location. So there's no acoustic fencing, because that wasn't found to be necessary, but additional planting is being provided in that area to provide screening, which would help both from an acoustic and a visual point of view.
If it is found necessary at a later date, will that be looked into?
clearly it's not part of the planning application, but with any impacts from a road of this nature, if it's found later on to causing a significant harm, then clearly the Highway Authority would need to look at that, but it's not something you could require as part of this planning application.
Michael again.
Thank you, Chair. As an old member. Yes, I'm sure the proposal will alleviate the congestion that's in Melton. I've not been to Melton for a couple of years, but yeah, the times that I've been there, it's been a busy place. I'm not sure it would have gone ahead without all the housing that's being built to the north and that area, but we are where we are. I don't think any of us can be happy that great swathes of the countryside are being tarmacked over. I think it's terribly sad that we lose that much green space. I understand the reasons for doing so. I can't find any planning reasons to object to this proposal, I'll be honest with you. But the one concern that I've got, and nobody seems to have noticed or mentioned it yet, is the ecological impact. The one real disappointment for me in the report was the consultations, and I was hoping in the update there might be something from them. But the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust, not a word. And yet the impact on badgers, otters, bats, the great crested newts, which are going to have to be migrated to somewhere else, we're damaging the ecology by doing this. Some people think the greater good is that we get the road built and alleviate the congestion. I don't agree. I think the damage we do to the ecological area can't be undone. Once it's done, it's done. And the fact that we're having to do mitigation to get the passes under the roads for animals so there's not too much roadkill, the very fact that we're doing the mitigation says we're doing damage. And I think for that reason alone, I'll neither support it nor object to it. I will abstain.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Chairman. I support this proposal, and I went on the site visit, and officers explained in great detail the proposal, and many questions were asked, and I'm pleased that the answers that was of great concern have been added into the supplementary, so it's saved me sitting here going through questions when they were answered in the supplementary, so I'd like to thank the officers for that. When we were having a bypass in my area, there was great concerns about issues like Mr. Chelms has just mentioned, and it's always a concern to people when things are being built through areas of green land. But there was low tarmac put down. Many trees have been planted, and we hardly know that it's there, but it has taken a lot of the heavy traffic away from my area. So that is why I fully support this recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Janice. Mr. Crooks.
Thank you, Chairman. I too went on the site visit and found it very interesting. I'd seen maps of it, but it's a lot better to have a look at it on the ground and have it explained to you. I support this bypass, and as Councillor Harrison said, a lot of town centres now are very near to the boundary for pollution, and moving this out will obviously help, because a lot of the time the cars are stopped and, you know, ticking over. I know the modern ones switch off, but there's still plenty of the old ones. Having said that, eventually this road will be built up as well. For listening to what we were told, there's going to be hundreds of houses built round it eventually. So, you know, it will eventually come to the same sort of situation. And bypasses, whilst they help the town centre in one way, they're not always the best, because I've seen other bypasses being put in and the local businesses suffer because the passing trade disappears. So, you know, there are downsides to it, but in whole, we've got to welcome it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think the site visit was very useful, and I'm certainly pleased I went on it. So you can at least see it in its flesh then. Tony, you moved this. Are you encompassing the update sheet also within that, Chairman? David, is that okay? Yeah. Well, if there's no other speakers, we'll move to the vote then. All in favour of the recommendations? That's unanimous, I think.
Mr. Charlesworth is.
Oh, Mr. Charles. Ah, you did. Yeah, thank you. We move on to agenda item number.
Mr. Chairman.
Dave, Michael. Yes. Oh, okay. All those against then? Michael is. Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you for the correction. Page 43. Thank you very much. Item number 10 then is a application for New Boldverden Primary School. Michael, would you be able to, when it's quieting down, of course? Nick, I should say, not Michael. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 10 is a planning application relating to New Boldverden Primary School, and this is an application for a new standalone classroom block. It will be constructed in the area highlighted in red, the upper area highlighted on the screen. The lower part is an area where proposed replacement car parking will be provided, because the location of the new modular block would be across some existing parking bays. The image there on the screen shows the design of the new block, so it's constructed in modular form from fibre cement panels with external vertical cedar cladding and powder coated aluminium frames, and the detail of those materials is in paragraphs 10 and 11 of the report. The school presently accommodates 210 pupils. This new 3-classroom block would allow the school to increase its capacity to 315 pupils. There are presently 23 full-time and 33 part-time members of staff, and no changes are proposed to that at this stage, although over time it is possible that that could change. Access and car parking arrangements and servicing would remain as existing. As I say, the extension or the freestanding building would overlap some existing spaces, and they would be compensated for. The development would result in the loss of 3 disabled parking bays, but they would be replaced by 3 non-disabled bays. The 24 cycle parking spaces would remain as existing. So a couple of photographs. This is the location of where the building would be located, looking eastwards. And again, just to the side with Dragon Lane visible behind. And again, a view facing southeast. This is a photograph from the front from Dragon Lane, and you can see the staff car parking area is located behind the row of trees and hedge, and the road has got keep clear markings on that side of the highway. The development will result in the loss of 16 trees of varying quality, which of course is always regrettable. You'll see from the recommendation that we're recommending additional planting to compensate for that. The site is close to the conservation area boundary, but given the scale, size and location of the building, we don't believe it would detract from the character of the conservation area. You'll see also that the recommendation proposes additional back boxes to be installed for ecological reasons. In terms of the highways impact, you'll see from the report at paragraphs 14 and 15 that the submitted transport assessment concludes that while additional trips would be generated, that would not have a significant impact on the local highway network. There are known problems in this area, and we're aware that a petition has been handed in quite late, over 700 signatures, referring to a new pedestrian crossing outside the school on Dragon Lane. This has been looked into carefully by my highway colleagues, and they may wish to comment in a moment. But it's found, having carried out surveys, that the criteria for providing one of those crossings has not been met, and therefore that's not part of the proposal in front of us. Instead, that's something that we believe should be taken up separately outside of this planning application. Just a final comment, we're recommending an updated school travel plan, which obviously is to discourage travel by private car. And on that basis, we're recommending approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do you want to bring the highways colleagues in now, or do you want to? Are you able to do that?
Good afternoon, everybody. As Nick pointed out, there were some concerns about additional pedestrians and children crossing if these proposals were approved. The Highway Authority has undertaken 2 independent separate surveys outside the school. One was by our Safe and Sustainable Travel colleagues who carried out the survey specifically at school times in the AM and the PM. And the other survey was carried out by colleagues in Traffic and Signals Department. Both surveys, my understanding was that they didn't meet the criteria for a pedestrian crossing outside this site. I should point out that Safe and Sustainable Travel colleagues have suggested that they would be willing to repeat the surveys if the proposals were approved here by the committee, to see whether any additional pupils crossing would then trigger any further requirements for a pedestrian crossing.
Thank you. Mr. Crooks, it's your ward.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to speak to this item, and also the late petition, which unfortunately wasn't handed in. The final part wasn't handed in to me till middle of last week, and I wasn't aware, in my naivety, of the 8-day rule. So even then, it would have been out of date. And if we are prepared to look at it later, then I'll be happy with that. Having said that, on item 60, which is on page 56, I'd already rang in some time ago with concerns about this crossing, for the simple reason that the lady that we had as a lollipop lady, who I don't know whether she was set on, but certainly a lollipop crossing person was set on some 20 years ago when a child got killed outside the school, and that was when there was a lot less children there, and here we are proposing another 100. I've not been involved in the petition, although the parish council has, and I'm a member of the parish council, but I was too busy to get involved. Local residents have produced this petition. There's 710 signatures and one handwritten letter it contains, and they've had it in all the schools and shops and clubs and you name it. So from a village of about 2,000, 710 is quite a good number. So there are concerns. The fact that the lollipop lady has been retired through ill health and not replaced, makes a concern even more to local residents. Right opposite is the parish council's main park, and just where this pavement is here, right in the corner, there's a gate, and that takes you into the park. And recently the parish council has paid £20,000 out to have a hard surface path across this park, because it's a shortcut to the main part of the village, and a lot of the residents walk to the school, and that's what we're encouraging, kids to walk to school. And I note that this survey was done in March. Well, that time of year, I must admit, a lot of people do drive the cars. But in the summer, if you go down there now, you'll find this park is full of parents crossing and going backwards and forwards to the village. The parish council received a grant from Tarmac, who've been getting gravel out, of 68,000 to improve the park. There's a lot more facilities in there, a mugger and one thing and another. And they're well on the way to getting another grant of 80,000 from the borough, plus they've got 40,000 to add to that from a solar farm funding initiative to put even more stuff in there. So it is an attraction for kids. They come out of school and they do shoot across this road to go in this park. So I mean, if this petition can be considered at a later date, and if members would support that, then I would be happy with that, you know, having made the mistake of not getting it in earlier. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, just looking at the wording of the petition, I think it'd be more appropriate for the Environment and Transport Scrutiny Committee. So if Mr Crooks is happy to present that, there's a meeting on the 6th of June, which would be appropriate for that to be presented to. Okay?
I think it'd probably be a beneficial thing for you to do, is to do that.
I'm already there, Chairman, with another petition.
Oh. You're not collecting them, are you?
No, this one I was involved in, it's from Balston, but this particular one about the crossing was nothing to do with me. I was just asked if I would bring it along.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
As an observation, I think Mr Crooks is spot on. If we want families and children to walk to a school, there's got to be a safe access to it. We don't want them to bring vehicles because they clog up the streets, and the fumes are dangerous for very young, well, for all people, but we've got young children exposed. Whereas if we want to turn the tide, I think we do have to think, is it really safe? And we've got to really give that a little bit of thought. Not today, it's not appropriate, but it's worth a comment for people to think about as time goes on. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
I was just curious, for clarity, what criteria did it not meet, this crossing, and by how much?
The petition that I've got here, the results of the survey that I've got here, my colleagues in Traffic and Signals team show that it was fairly well below the criteria. I can read out the numbers, whether that makes any difference to you.
As long as I and everybody else can understand it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something called CJV. I must point out that the survey is done in line with all the national guidance. It's what other local authorities use as well. So it's the approach that the Highway Authority take to all crossings across the county. The CJV value of the final PV squared information was 0.069. Now, to put that into some sort of perspective, the criteria when we start looking at pedestrian crossings is a guide for values between 0.4 to 0.6 uncontrolled crossings should be considered. So things like refuges, road narrowings, build-outs and drop curbs. If it's above 0.6, then control measures are considered, so zebras, puffins and toucan crossings, etc.
Yeah, so I'm guessing what you're saying is it's not busy enough. Pedestrian traffic's not busy enough.
I acknowledge that it's busy at school times, but the rest of the time, when the period of the survey, it didn't meet that criteria, I'm afraid, so no.
Any further comments? I mean, I've got a recommendation on page 59. Yeah. Seconded? This is right. There's no other comments. We'll move to the vote then. All in favour of the recommendation on page 59? Okay. Anyone against? No. That's passed then. Thank you. Move on to agenda item number 11, which is on page 65. This is a application at Brooksby College, Quarry. Nick, would you be able to speak to this report, please?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Chairman. So item 11 relates to Brooksby Quarry, Melton Road, Brooksby, and it's an application to extend the existing Grandon Savile workings along with the associated restoration proposals. The extension area covers 54 hectares of existing farmland. It's identified on the plan in red. Remaining reserves granted permission previously will be used by mid-2019, and so permission is sought urgently to allow for extraction to continue. Granting permission would allow for 1.4 million tonnes of minerals to be extracted at a rate of up to 250,000 tonnes per year, meaning that it will take approximately 6 years to complete the extraction of sand and gravel. Restoration would be back to agricultural use, and that would include importing approximately 1.5 million tonnes of inert material, and it's intended that the site will be fully restored by 2030 to 31. The site access would continue to be via the A607 Melton Road. Surrounding villages and side roads are already weight restricted, so controls are in place to prevent HGVs from using those routes. We have received an objection from a local resident about the potential disruption to a water supply, and that's set out at paragraph 156 of the report. That water supply is protected under a legal agreement, and therefore if the quality of that water is eroded over time, then there are controls in place to deal with that. You'll see that we are content that the application complies with development plan policies in respect of relevant environmental impacts. Controls are recommended by conditions and also by environmental permitting controls. This application will bring significant benefits to meeting the shortfall of sand and gravel reserves, which we feel would outweigh the adverse environmental impacts, which are short-term and manageable. And on that basis, we're recommending that permission be granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Nick. We do have a speaker on this item, Tiffany Lloyd from Tarmac Trading Limited. Oh, you're there. Tiffany, you've got 3 minutes. If you'd like to press the button in the centre to light you up, and then if you just remain there when you finish speaking in case there's any questions for you. So start when you're ready. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members. You'll be grateful to hear that I won't be taking very much of your time this afternoon. As the Chairman has said, my name is Tiffany Lloyd, and I work at Tarmac as a planning surveyor. I've worked on the Brooksby Quarry planning application for the last 2.5 years, and I'm not nervous to say that this is my first major mineral application. And I've been grateful for Mr. Marriott's professional guidance throughout this process. Brooksby Quarry is a well-managed site which operates safely and efficiently. It is only one of 5 sand and gravel units in Leicestershire. The quarry liaison meetings have been active since the quarry began operation in 2006. There is good participation from Hobey, Rotherby Parish Council, and I'm pleased to say that the meetings work quite well. The committee report, which has been prepared, is set out very clearly, and the proposed planning conditions accurately reflect the consultation which Mr. Marriott has undertaken. And with that, thank you, Chairman and members, for listening today, and I would be happy to answer any points of clarification which you may have.
Thank you, Tiffany. That was brief and short and sweet. Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Charlesworth. Oh.
Yeah, can't let her off that lightly, can we? Oh, no. Okay, yeah, clarity then, please. We know what's coming out, 250,000 tonnes per annum of sand and gravel. What exactly are the constituents of the 250,000 tonnes of inert infill?
Sorry, just to clarify, in terms of what would the infill waste be?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, no, that's fine. So it wouldn't be your usual landfill household waste. Inert waste, in the terms that we understand it, is building construction materials, bricks, that type of thing. So none of it's toxic or asbestos related. I hope that answers your question.
Right. Members, anyone? Pardon? Seconded. Oh. Yep, looks like it. Moved and seconded. All in favour? Anyone against? Oh, thank you. Move on to item number 12 then, which is on page 115. Nick, please, yes, Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. So item 12 is a proposal for a paper and plastic waste storage facility at Unit 11 Wymeswold Industrial Estate. The application would allow for 10,000 tonnes per annum of paper and plastics to be stored. Additional parking spaces are proposed on the site to increase from 5 to 11, and the scheme also proposes an additional 12 full-time equivalent employees. The building to house the material to be stored is illustrated on the screen in front of you. It's a typical industrial building and very much in keeping with the industrial setting within which the building will be located. Just a couple of photographs to show the current yard and the parking of vehicles. So just to illustrate the context, that this is very much an industrial setting. The hours of working will be 7 a.m. till 5:30 p.m. We've had no objections from local residents or the parish. This is a designated employment land, and this type of use is very much in keeping and in accordance with the policy designation. It complements the existing waste management facility, and therefore is in accordance with policy. We have conditions to control the movement of vehicles, the amount of materials being stored, and to also control the height of any external storage. And on that basis, we're recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Are there any comments from Mr. Shepherd? Ewan?
I've not received any comments from Mr. Shepherd, no.
Okay. Open to members then. Oh. Mrs. Wright, you wanted to speak?
Just quickly, yes, please. It was just car parking, because on 119.12 it says, applicant advises 11 car parking spaces will be provided, but the drawings only show spaces for 5 and does not detail HGV, and they'd probably park on the lane or anything. And I was just seeking clarification if that is correct, or it's been rectified, or it wouldn't cause a problem.
Thank you, Chairman. Condition 8 states that provision shall be made within the site to allow for the parking of 15 cars and 4 HGVs with turning space. So, yes, I think the plans are inadequate in terms of how they illustrate that. We believe that can be provided. They just need to show it on a plan how it will work, and that's what that condition will do. Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favour? Anyone against? No. Unanimous. Item number 13 then is Mr. Shaw. Are you available?
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, members. This is an application that's been received from Mrs. Inkley of 3 Woodbank, Glenparva, to fell a Corsican pine tree located on her property. The applicant wishes to fell the Corsican pine tree for the reasons that the tree is fully mature and has outgrown the location, and that the stem and the crown are unbalanced and lean towards the canal, and there is an increased risk that the tree could blow over in high winds, causing damage to the canal banks. It is proposed to plant a replacement tree. That's the aerial. That's the tree there. Blaby District Council has responded saying that the tree has no significant structural defaults and that it contributes to the street scene and the conservation area, the Grand Union Canal Conservation Area. The Corsican pine was found to be stable in the ground with no significant faults and considered to be at low risk of failing in high winds. the tree as part of a line of protected canal side Corsican pine trees contribute to the amenity of the canal conservation area and the surrounding areas. The removal of the Corsican pine tree would have a detrimental impact on the amenity of the area, and I recommend to you that this application is refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Sorry.
Sorry, can I move the recommendation, Chair?
Yes, of course. Sean, did you want to speak?
Move it or second it, but looks like I missed the chance. So.
Well, Mr. Charles, have you got something?
I have got a question, Chair. It's probably for legal more than the tree officer. I've had experience at district level that even where an authority refuses permission to fell a tree, the applicant or their agent can then go to the Forestry Commission and put an application in there which would override anything that we say here, and the tree can then be felled. Is that correct or not?
Mr. Shaw, are you able to comment on that, or Anthony?
The Forestry Commission has responsibility for woodlands. Tree protection orders can protect woodlands and groups of trees and areas, but the Forestry Commission have no powers where trees are in domestic gardens, churchyards, and generally within urban areas. So they would not be able to, they haven't got the powers to give consent to fell in this particular circumstance. But there are circumstances where the Forestry Commission would in effect take over a tree preservation order application should it involve a volume of more than 5 cubic meters in any quarter of timber. This particular tree is probably about 2.5 cubic meters in of timber, and would be under the 5 cubic meters in any case. But the Forestry Commission would not have the powers to give consent to fell this tree because it doesn't come within the remit to the Forestry Act 1967.
Chair, it would be interesting or very useful to have some further information on this, because I've had a case in Oadby and Wigston where an application was refused 3 times. They then went to the Forestry Commission and some fir trees were then given permission to be felled and have been felled. So it would be interesting to get some more clarity and detail around these sort of things so members can understand it a bit better.
Thank you, Michael. Janice.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine is a bit of a query, but I've got to go on to the next proposal, if I'm allowed to do that.
No, we can only really do with one at a time.
Sorry?
We can only do with agenda item 13.
Well, it was a query, that was all.
Yeah,
but if it's going to be voted on...
what we've got in front of us, to be quite honest.
But if it's going to be voted on, I wanted a question answering.
We'll ask you a question and we'll see if we can answer it.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, because this is on a lien and because it's shading the house and other things that's allegedly wrong with it, on the next one that they recommend to fell, when there's nothing wrong with the tree, but I do appreciate that the applicant's son has problems, but it said the shade cast by the horse chestnut T1 when a leaf is reducing, the applicant's son can enjoy the outdoor play. But really that is only about 3 months of the year when there's leaves on it. So I just wanted, before I vote or cast my vote, I just wondered that they're going to chop a perfectly good tree down, when on the one before it's on the lean and various other things they say is wrong with it. So I just can't work out why one should... sorry about this, but it's something I've read and I just wanted it... I wanted it querying.
Are you able to answer this without prejudicing the next item, Mr. Shaw?
Each application is taken on its individual merits, and that has to be, all the factors have to be considered. So it's difficult to compare one application against another, and it doesn't necessarily, because you make an application to refuse one tree, doesn't necessarily create a precedent, because each circumstance in each individual site and each individual application can be quite different.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we go with the recommendation. All in favour? Anyone against? Carried. Sorry? You're against, are you? One against. Abstaining, oh. Okay. Right, move on to agenda item number 14. Mr. Shaw, please.
This is an application by Mr. and Mrs. Fanthorpe of 33 Westminster Drive, Burbage, to fell a horse chestnut tree located on their property. The reason for their request to fell the horse chestnut tree is to enable the garden that is densely shaded by the tree to be landscaped with a suitable flat surface, appropriate play equipment and a vegetable garden to provide a safe play area for their son, who suffers from a rare condition called neurofibromatosis type 1. This condition causes significant impairment of the nervous system, vision, reduced muscle tone and learning difficulties. The child has a Leicestershire County Council Educational Healthcare Plan, and the shade cast by the horse chestnut tree and the seasonal dropping of conkers and leaves creates a significant safety risk to the child when it is playing out in the garden. The Burbage Parish Council objects to the application to fell the horse chestnut tree and state that the shade cast by the tree and the seasonal dropping of conkers and leaves is considered insufficient reason to remove the tree that has, in their view, amenity value. In addition, the removal of the tree would not have a significant effect on the amount of sun entering the garden. The safety risk to the child tripping or slipping on fallen conkers and leaves shed by the horse chestnut is a seasonal hazard and can be mitigated by regular collection and disposal of the leaves and the conkers. The seasonal falling of leaves and fruit is not considered to be sufficient reason to remove the protected tree. The horse chestnut, however, does cast significant shade, which is preventing the establishment of a level grass lawn and vegetable beds. It also results in damp conditions that would lead to the rapid deterioration of any specialist play equipment installed in the garden, making it unsafe for children to use. The shade cast by the horse chestnut tree is reducing the opportunities for their son to enjoy outdoor play in the rear garden. The horse chestnut is a large growing tree that has the potential to grow further over the applicant's garden, Approved regular pruning of the tree is potentially costly to the applicants and in time may lead to weak branch unions and decay cavities in the tree. The removal of the horse chestnut tree would allow the garden to be landscaped and play equipment installed. The minor loss of amenity in the area will be mitigated by the mature protected oak tree growing outside the boundary of the applicant's garden. Consequently, I recommend that consent is granted to fell the horse chestnut tree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Anything from Mrs. A. Wright?
I've not received anything from Mrs. Wright, no.
No. Okay. Members, Charles, Michael? Right.
I don't know whether it's relevant or fair to ask the question. Let others decide. But how long have they lived there? If they've just moved in and decided the tree's in the way, I'd have an issue with that. But if they've lived there for quite a while and just had a child relatively few years ago and there's an issue with the child that needs alleviating, fine. But I probably won't get an answer, but I'd like to know how long they've lived there.
Do you know, Mr. Shaw?
Yes. The Fanthorpes have lived there for 15 years. The child is between 6 and 7 years old, and he has got a brother as well. So that they want somewhere where they can both play in the garden together.
Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So you want to cut a tree down, basically, so they can spend, probably 20% of the time in the garden playing. And they'll probably end up arguing and not playing at all. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that you even considered cutting this tree down just so people can play. I think it's outrageous. I won't be voting for it.
Any other comments? Mrs. Wright. Mr. Kaufman.
Chair, I'm afraid I agree with the comments just now. Quite frankly, if it was anybody else, you would suggest that people move to a more suitable. If somebody's got disabilities, you move to a property which accommodates their disabilities. I'm not happy about chopping this tree down. I'm really not.
Mrs. Wright, again.
I recognise the commendable reasons for approval and felling the tree. However, I have to agree with the comments made by Burbage Parish Council, because looking at the photographs provided and the oak actually being behind it, I should imagine that really puts quite a lot of shade and everything there. So I think you probably felled the horse chestnut to have the same problem caused by the oak tree. And I must admit, I do have difficulty and it follows the point raised by Councillor Richards, saying, you know, we're refusing one tree on an application. I know you have to take them on their own merit, but for consistency, I'm afraid I can't support it.
Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I agree with some of the comments just been made. It seems an awful shame. Could I ask a technical question then through you, Mr. Chairman? What would be the appropriate planning terms to refuse?
Mr. Shaw?
I mean, the reason we have tree preservation orders is to preserve the amenity of the area. But as you're aware, you have the right as a human right to have the enjoyment of your property, and that obviously goes for your family as well. So whenever we look at these applications, what we're always balancing is the loss of amenity to the public versus the loss of the private enjoyment of the property. And it's what each of these reports tries to do is to manage that balance. And as you read through this report, you'll see that the horse chestnut has the removal of the horse chestnut would be minor loss of amenity. obviously the issues with the family of this disabled child, and the disabled child are very uppermost in the minds of the parents, and are just they are wanting to provide an improved facility for their disabled child who, unlike other children, isn't able to go and play on the recreation ground, which is actually next door. So the coming to my recommendation, I tried to balance out this loss of enjoyment, private enjoyment, which we have a right to, against the loss of public amenity. And sometimes the loss of private enjoyment would overcome the loss of public amenity. And in my view, as I said in the report, that was my view in this particular case.
Yeah, there's a flow of concern, I think, across the committee today about this. The photographs, I have to say, and that's been all through our meeting, have not been really of a good standard, Mr. Chairman. I noticed quite a bad deterioration. It's just a vague black and white now. They used to be quite good quality, and I used to sort of quite like to tell people in planning and elsewhere that what wonderful pictures we had to help us make decisions. So that's first comment. But I can see that the oak trees there, isn't it? And there's going to, how much a difference felling that will it make, really, truthfully, because the oak tree is going to grow and it has a broad spread across an oak tree. I mean, I can't see, truthfully, that it's going to be a massive, massive change. What it means, of course, is you don't have to pick up the leaves and the cones, as people do with those sort of trees. So that is a saving of that sort of work. But, if there was a need, surely you'd sort of get on and do that, deal with it. I just feel a bit concerned that, we want to honour and follow the principles, and where there's a special medical reason has been outlined, I think it's holding on us to consider that as well. But it doesn't fit well, really, with surrounding trees. If they're all coming down and you're getting this library, I don't know. I just feel it's not clear-cut for me. It's not so simple. I hear about the child and the needs, so that's great sympathy there. But then I look at the other day-to-day, we're dealing with it, and there's a tree close to it that's going to have enormous spread and going to cause problems, and they're quite good height trees, oaks. I'm not sure it'll really answer it, Chairman. Thank you.
I'd like to just bring Anthony in on this.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, members, Mr. Shaw's made the comment. The officer makes a recommendation. It's for the members to make the decision. You have a recommendation before you to approve the recommendation, which is to allow the tree to be felled. But it's open to you as the decision makers not to agree that. The result would then be that then you'd have to make a decision on what you want to happen to the tree.
Thank you, Chairman.
For clarification, it was your last comment. I thought if we didn't approve doing away with the tree protection order, it stays. Is that that's the only course open to us, isn't it?
Well, I think you have to give a reason why you don't want the tree to be felled, which then becomes the decision you have to vote on again, that you want the tree to remain for the reasons that you've given. So that's what I meant. I mean, you are quite right, through you, Chairman, to Mr. Kaufman, that is the net result, but you just have to get there. There's a process to get there.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, listening to everybody, I understand, but also the explanation Mr. Shaw's provided me has basically swung me to support the recommendation, Chairman, as I move it.
Yeah, I think the relatively small loss of amenity value balanced against the judgment of the family there, that I think we have to take their word for it. We have to be sympathetic. I would say this is a good call. The recommendation is right.
In the case of the committee being minded to refuse the recommendation, do you want justification now or when that happens?
When, depending on the decision, through you, Chairman.
Moved and seconded. We better have a vote on that and see where that lands us. All in favour of the recommendation? All against then? I think that's kind of more. Right, Mr. Cross.
So now, Chairman, we want a decision in terms of the reasons why the tree shouldn't be felled.
Michael, please do.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I think on the grounds of amenity to start with, I think on the reasons of the health and safety of the tree, they're all considerable factors. It's doing no harm, and I think the panel committee has come to a reasonable and fair decision.
I'll second that, Chair.
Please, yeah.
So perhaps I could summarise that on the basis that you feel that removal of the tree would in fact have a detrimental impact. Is that really what you're sort of coming to the view, is that you prefer the tree to the amenity of the area? So if we can, let's just have a vote on, if someone can move and just second that.
All in favour of that then? Against.
So who's against it now?
Okay.
That was 4. Can we have just who's against that, please? Yeah, yes, we've had the 4. I just didn't note down who was against. So this is voting that the tree should go. So who's against that?
Against the tree going?
Yeah.
I guess it's getting complicated, this.
The tree stay.
Yeah, Michael and Ian.
In the majority. Now those who are against what I've just recommended.
I moved the opposite recommendation, so.
You're against it.
Yeah, okay. So we just need to... Yeah. So we just need to know, just for the first, who is against that, so we just record it. 2.
And me.
And the chairman, 3. Thank you.
Are we clear? Oh, dear. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 15. Any other items the chairman has decided to take as urgent? We don't have any of those. And item 16 is chairman's announcements. Thank you very much for coming and thank you for being patient with me. Thank you very much. The meeting's closed.